Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing fantastic on this Friday afternoon / evening, depending on where you are, or really morning. I know some people are all over the place. Like I said, I hope you're doing well. We have a big show as far as the news goes, but I am going to have to hop off right after going through the news, so there won't be any React content today. But I'll possibly be streaming over the weekend, and then a big week next week, as always. Doug is already in the chat asking, not asking anything. It's a music question. Shoot. Warning me that he has a question. Interesting. Go for it. Shoot. So today we're going to be talking about the PACT Act, the Veterans Support Bill that failed in the Senate, was blocked by some senators, and Jon Stewart is going out and advocating for them. He's very angry, justifiably, and calling for Congress to act on that. So we'll be discussing that whole debacle. And then an interesting kind of speculation came out of a video that another YouTuber went over, but the actual original video was from CNN, of a guy breaking down kind of what Liz Cheney's master plan could be with all of this, and how she could actually save us from a really, bad Republican president. We'll talk about how in that segment. I don't want to spoil it, but fascinating stuff. I'm not sure if it's her plan, but if it's not, it should become her plan. And then a really heartbreaking story that has kind of a larger point around it, relating to a police incident that happened. One second. Spilled on myself. And then we're going to be talking about Jared Kushner, obviously Trump's son-in-law, wrote a book making some pretty bold claims, and others close to the Trump family, who were in the administration, are denying the facts of that situation. So all of that we'll be going through. It'll be a lot of fun. You're familiar with Bad Bunny? Yes, I'm familiar with Bad Bunny. Just ask the question. Why are you teeing it up so much? I gotta get started. I'm waiting to get into the news just to answer the question. Tell me, Doug. Shoot it at me. There's a delay. I gotta wait so long. Oh, Ben. Ben said I'm beautiful. Thank you so much, Ben. That is quite sweet of you to say. All right. I just saw this off-the-wall reaction on this island. It was cult-like. The entire island was entranced with this concert. I thought we were going to die. Sorry. What? I just saw this off-the-wall reaction on this island. It was cult-like. The entire island was... I don't know what you're talking about, but cool. Good stuff. All right, let's jump into our first story. Jon Stewart has gotten some attention over the last 48 hours because he has very boldly and aggressively begun to advocate for veterans who, because of the Senate, did not receive enhanced benefits and enhanced health coverage, specifically veterans who were exposed to toxic material and thus got things like cancer because of it while they were in the service. And there was a bill that was previously implemented that addressed that. And so now it comes back up, discussions around it now here in 2022. The Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics Act of 2021 was the original one, and now they're trying to pass it in 2022. And it didn't get passed in the Senate. And Jon Stewart, someone who has advocated for other people who in the line of duty, had very negative effects due to toxic waste. He had advocated for 9/11 first responders to get their proper benefits, is now out on the front line, kind of getting a bunch of attention stirred up around this issue to make sure that the Senate ends up passing this, because they failed to in the recent vote. So we'll first take a look at Jon Stewart's a compilation that the Damage Report put together of Jon Stewart over the last, I think, just 24 hours, maybe 48, on all these different shows, really passionately and emotionally advocating for these individuals. And then we'll kind of get into the specifics of what the bill is and why it's important that we get it passed. But first, him advocating for veterans, here's his response to it not getting passed.
This is an embarrassment to the Senate.
Of course, if you're not familiar with Jon Stewart, he was he used to be the Daily Show host. So political guy, also comedian, and gets involved on different issues like this.
The country, to the founders, and all that they profess to hold dear. And if this is America first, then America is
They don't support the troops. They support the war machine. And that's got to stop. The value in the U.S. military isn't in the toys. It's not in the hardware. It's not in the tanks. It's in the men and women. And until they start supporting them in the manner that they purport to online, they are hypocrites.
It is
the most despicable part of this whole thing is watching on the Senate floor Ted Cruz fist bumping and then patting each other on the back when they blocked this bill. Josh Hawley and Pat Toomey celebrating their victory over veterans with cancer. Way to go, guys. You finally handed it to big veteran with cancer. Well done.
They're never going to hear this. There's an information silo. I was lucky enough to be able to get a hold of Newsmax this morning and go on there. Might have been the first time those viewers had ever heard about it. Fox News, they've refused to put me on all day.
So if there's one group that our government should not neglect to give all the support possible, it is individuals who went and fought for our country, and because of those actions and that commitment to our country, were exposed to just generally all veterans, of course, but then even more kind of emotionally charged is someone who went and got exposed to, radiation poisoning or toxins of some kind that gave them cancer. And now we're not giving them everything that they need to get through that and to be healthy. So to kind of analyze what's in this act and why it's important they get it, a breakdown by HITC. For the unversed, the PACT Act, or Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxins Act of 2021, is a comprehensive bill that addresses healthcare, research, resources, the presumption of service connection, and other matters related to veterans who get exposed to toxic substances during their time in the military. It was originally introduced in the Senate on June 17, 2021. If passed, the bill would enable $400 billion over the next 10 years in spending. The bill is meant to do the following: expansion of healthcare eligibility, so more veterans being able to be eligible for this expanded healthcare coverage, toxic exposure presumption process, improving the establishment of service connection process, improving the establishment of service connection process for toxic exposed veterans, and then improvement of resources and training regarding toxic exposed veterans, and much more. So the kind of most dumbed down version of it is veterans who were exposed to toxicity that is now causing health effects, getting extra levels of support, extra level of health care due to that, which I think is a no-brainer. Obviously, Jon Stewart thinks it's a no-brainer. If you go serve our country and end up having devastating health effects because of it, or even minor health effects, every bit of that process, every bit of it should be taken care of. But then, of course, to give a fair shake to why people voted against it, it was primarily Republicans, but Democrat too. Chuck Schumer actually voted against it. So they do argue their side of it that we'll look at here, to be fair. While not all Republican senators who voted against the PACT Act have publicly explained why they did so, several have offered insight on why the GOP opposition grew after the initial vote in June. So, initial vote, higher than it is now. A release from GOP Senator Pat Toomey's office on Tuesday said that the PACT Act would enable $400 billion over the next 10 years in spending completely unrelated to veterans. So the talking point from Republicans, specifically Pat Toomey, is that, listen, I'm fine, and again, this is from his perspective, I'm fine supporting the veterans in this situation, but a lot of this money isn't going towards that particular purpose. And a lot of times, they call that pork whenever there's something in a bill that is unrelated that is trying to kind of get passed along with it. That's not my impression. I think this whole bill should be passed as is. And this is often the cop-out. Oh, I would if it was just this, and this. But there's other stuff. So that's why I'm going to vote against the entire thing. So interesting. Continuing on, it noted that Toomey, a Pennsylvania lawmaker, has a technical fix that does not reduce spending on veterans by even $1 or affect the expansion of care and benefits in the underlying bill. The PAC Act, as written, includes a budget gimmick, this is from Pat Toomey's office, that would allow $400 billion of current law spending to be moved from the discretionary to mandatory spending category. It went on, this provision is completely unnecessary to achieve. So then it goes on to explain why he's against that provision. And why, therefore, he's against the entire bill right now, as is. Someone else, quote, Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas, has also commented on why the effort to advance the legislation was unsuccessful. He quoted in a Wednesday CNN article as saying that Schumer would not allow amendment votes the Republicans were pushing for. It notes at the end that Jon Stewart sharply condemned the development. I want to just confirm one second. Just so I know I'm not giving you any misinformation on Chuck Schumer. Okay, so to be fair to Chuck Schumer, the reason that he's citing for changing his vote from a yes to a no is for some reason that would allow a future vote to happen. So it sounds like he originally had his vote at yes, but then changed it to no. This is a Republican opposed bill for sure. And it looks like Chuck Schumer does want to eventually get it passed. So to be as fair as possible and honest as possible to Chuck Schumer, that is the case. So like I said, overall, I think this bill is absolutely necessary, absolutely good. We should treat veterans, especially those in this specific situation, as honorably and expansively as possible. Give them the help they need. And I love the passion and energy that Jon Stewart is bringing to this issue. I honestly have no doubt that it'll eventually get passed with some adjustments, and hopefully that's what Chuck Schumer's trying to do right now, and hopefully we'll see these veterans get what they need. All right. Check out the chat. How's everybody doing? Hey, Tony. Yeah, Jon Stewart's background with the 9/11 responders is really awesome. Super, super cool. Okay, let's jump into our next story. Liz Cheney has become much more prominent than I think she ever was before, primarily, and I would say exclusively, because she spoke out against Trump's lies about the 2020 election and said one of the most obvious facts, which is that Joe Biden did win the election fairly, squarely, and the claims that were being made by Trump and his allies were not true about it being stolen. And then she got even more prominent as she was kind of one of the front people in the January 6th Select Committee investigating January 6th and the events surrounding it. And while she's become very popular in some circles and respected by many because of those actions, of course, in the modern Republican Party, if you do speak out that aggressively against Trump's lies, you're going to lose support within the party. significantly. So because of that, her 2022 race is not looking good at all. But I have a really interesting thing to talk about and look at in relation to her, or possibly other, what you would call more moderate, more a little bit more honest Republicans, in what they're thinking about going forward, or what they maybe should be thinking about going forward. So as I was saying, 2022, not looking good for Liz Cheney. She will likely lose. But people are wondering what's next. I just want to quickly say, if you're someone who thinks, oh, she could run as a Republican and magically win, that's not happening. If you look at polling, it's Trump at the top, then DeSantis. DeSantis is as wacky as Trump, in the sense of he would collect the same types of voters as Trump would. Some people just, they want the bad policies, they want the unhinged, they just don't want it in the body of Trump anymore. So they want to move on with the same level of kind of MAGA energy, and that's what DeSantis represents. So seeing that half of the Republican Party is sick of Trump doesn't mean half of the Republican Party would go for someone like Liz Cheney. It's, I would say, closer to 70% or 80 maybe, who would go with either Trump or DeSantis, and then there's a sliver that wants someone more like Pence or Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger, but not nearly enough to defeat someone like Trump or DeSantis in a Republican primary. So let's just put that to rest. But there may be a really interesting opportunity if Liz Cheney chose to run for president, or if Adam Kinzinger, Mike Pence, as an independent. Now, the reason for this, and we're going to look at a few moments of her talking, indicating maybe she is thinking about this, is you could scrape away, as an independent, enough Republican voters to make it impossible for the Republican Party to win against the Democrats. Because obviously we're in a tough situation for the Democrats, where there's not an obvious presidential candidate who would absolutely do great. It's looking a little iffy, even though there's some options. It's not looking great in that department. But if you scraped away with an independent run by someone who is a Republican but just more reasonable, you could have 5, 6, 7, 8% of Republican voters say, I'm going to go vote for the independent presidential candidate who's a Republican that I respect. Because there are some Republican voters who don't believe in election lies and like someone like Pence or Cheney or Adam Kinzinger. What that would do, if you take away, with how close our elections are now, 5% even of one party's votes, that's it. Game over. If you could take away single digits percentage of the Republican Party votes in 2024 in the presidential race, you would give Democrats a sure victory. So Cheney's master plan could be to get enough support within the Republican Party not to win her own race for Congress, not even to have a chance in the Republican primary, but to run as an independent to scrape away enough voters from the Republican Party to allow the Democrats to win. So a moment here that was highlighted in a video that was really good by a CNN contributor shows a couple different things about how Cheney feels about her role in preventing Trump from getting to office, and indicates maybe that it would be more important to her to prevent Trump or someone like him than have the Democrats, lose. So let's take a look at that.
I am working hard here in Wyoming to earn every vote, but I will also say this: I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say things that aren't true about the election. My opponents are doing that, certainly simply for the purpose of getting elected.
And at another point, she said this:
if I have to choose between maintaining a seat in the House of Representatives or protecting the constitutional republic and ensuring the American people know the truth about Donald Trump, I'm going to choose the Constitution and the truth every single day.
Now,
I just want to say, before we discuss one more clip from her and then the rest of this kind of topic, guys, I recognize that she is a lifelong Republican, has lots of policies that we would absolutely be against. But you don't have to be black or white on everything. I've heard even progressives not want to give Liz Cheney any credit for what she's doing. You have to recognize politicians care about staying in power. Cheney, as well as Kinzinger, made a conscious decision to choose the position of integrity and honesty and facts over their own political career. She knew the second she went out against Trump's lies, likely she was going to lose in her next congressional race. That is integrity. Now, she's not amazing. We're not going to get along with her on working on a lot of most policy issues, but our government should be filled with people, even if they're all over the political spectrum and believe all different things, who at least have enough integrity to do something like this when it comes to it and choose the obvious and honest path over the politically advantageous path. So it is totally good to give her credit for that, because that is what we should want in our politicians, whether or not we support them in their policy positions. Okay, that's a side note. But as you can see there, she's recognizing a little bit that, listen, 2022 may not go the way that she would want it to, but that's totally worth it with her doing the work that she's doing in the January 6th Select Committee. So let's look at one more clip and then we'll discuss.
Really, at this point, I have not made a decision about 2024. But I do think as we look towards the next presidential election, as I said, I believe that our nation stands on the edge of an abyss. And I do believe that we all have to really think very seriously about the dangers we face and the threats we face, and we have to elect serious candidates.
That pretty much tells you everything you need.
And then one last moment here.
Fighting hard, no matter what happens on August 16th, I'm going to wake up on August 17th and continue to fight hard to ensure Donald Trump is never anywhere close to the Oval Office ever again.
So if that's her honest stance, that after her election, regardless of how it goes, she's going to wake up the next day and continue attempting to do everything possible to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president again. Well, one of the ways that you could absolutely do that effectively would be to garner enough Republican support for an independent run where you take away enough Republicans from the Republican Party to make the mainstream Republican Party weak enough where they can't beat the Democrats. Again, no chance, nor would I even support Liz Cheney being president, but if she did run for president as an independent, she could have a chance of taking away enough votes from the Republicans to secure a Democratic win, which, while I'm sure she doesn't like Democratic policies generally, she definitely recognizes that for the sake of our country, the sake of the future of our country and our democracy, the Democratic Party is the better option right now. Obviously, I believe that in most situations, but from her perspective, compared to anyone who believes in the election lies, such as Trump, or who's that deceitful and dishonest like Ron DeSantis. So interesting stuff. If this is the reason why she's kind of working it right now and getting up her profile and really going against Trump and not wavering in her own race to get more votes so that she can be the person who prevents Trump from getting in office next time, that would be a really good plan. And again, that could be her. She seems like the person who would be most likely, but someone else, Adam Kinzinger, Mike Pence, I don't think Mike Pence would do this at all. But Kinzinger or Cheney, or they could run together, choosing to run as an independent to prevent Trump from getting in office by taking away just enough Republican votes. It would just be a little bit. They're not going to be super popular in the Republican Party, but just enough to secure a Democratic win. Very interesting, and gives me some hope about the Democratic Party's chances if Liz Cheney or someone like her decides to go down this path. All right, let's read the chat. What do you guys think about that? Valiant Thor, random channel surfing. Have you ever been on my channel? If not, that's really awesome. What's up? Isn't that the idea of the Forward Party? To be somewhere between Democrats and Republicans? Yeah, that's stupid. I'm kidding. The Forward Party's stupid. I'm sorry. But yeah, we do need... I do think... Here's my point. What is in between Democrats and Republicans? I think that within the country, I am like in the middle. Like I really have issues with a lot of the way that the left operates, is super kind of judgmental and has a no forgiveness with people, and expects everyone to be super aware of the newest kind of wokest conversation and all those things. And then I recognize the biggest threat to our country right now is this anti-democratic right. And then my policies are really progressive as far as universal healthcare and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, supporting people being who they are and all of those issues. But I think most people, when you really break it down, are on board. But the branding of like progressives is oftentimes just so yeah, if the Forward Party tries to run a presidential candidate, that'll just be really irritating, because you're just throwing like a wrench in the whole thing, because you could accidentally scrape away a bunch of Democrats from the Democratic Party, which would be bad. Because like the Forward Party would never win, but they could take away enough to make an impact from one of the parties, which if they did it from Republicans, that would be great. But if they did it from Democrats, that could be damaging, of course. All right. Let's jump into our next story. We have, at the core of it, a really heartbreaking story to talk about. But then after getting past the actual story, I want to discuss a larger point around it. So, you guys may have been aware, this story went somewhat viral, and like I said, it's super devastating. But a woman, Brianna Marie Greer, who's just 28 years old, had the police called on her for whatever reason. A mental health situation was what I had heard, and she got put into a police car. Again, the reason why I don't care about that is it doesn't matter why the police were called to talk about this story. She was put in a police car, and one of the officers didn't close the door. And so then once the car was moving, she fell out and hit her head and was in a coma, but then ended up dying. And so you have this situation where a mistake from a police officer led to her dying. Now just hold with me if you're someone who feels like the left goes too hard against police officers. I really do have a larger, interesting, nuanced discussion to have in a second here. But first, I just want to give respect and attention to a heartbreaking story by itself. So let's quickly just break that down. And like I said, we have much more to talk about in relation to this. A report concluded that sheriff's deputies never closed the door of a moving squad car that a Georgia woman fell out from, resulting in her death. Brianna Marie Greer, 28 years old, sustained severe head injuries when she fell from the moving police car during an arrest in Sparta earlier this month. She died 6 days after the 15th of July arrest. On Wednesday, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations confirmed that Hancock County deputies failed to close the passenger's rear door near where Miss Greer was sitting. Miss Greer was handcuffed in the front of her body, not wearing a seatbelt. GBI concluded after reviewing numerous interviews, multiple body cam videos, and conducting exhaustive mechanical tests on the patrol car. So, here's the details if you are curious about what had happened. Miss Greer's mother had called police after her daughter experienced a mental health crisis, her family said. So that happens often. Someone's having a mental health crisis. For whatever reason, they're now threatening the safety of others or even threatening the safety of themselves, and people feel like they have to get the police involved. And this is why people advocate for some branch of the police department or that works with the police of mental health professionals who are not armed, who can go in these situations, even if the police are somewhere nearby. But the primary contact would be a mental health professional, because lots of police calls are in relation to a mental health crisis. And so being able to walk someone through that, being trained on that, would be very advantageous to all of us and to the people involved, because police aren't really trained on how to deal with someone to the level that a mental health professional would be when they're in that situation. And so it leads to terrible situations. And I do want to just say, it's always so heartbreaking thinking about from the perspective of this woman's mother who called the police, and now she feels like it's partly her fault. It's not at all. But knowing that she was the one who called the police that ended up leading to Breonna's death. So what's the larger point I want to make about this? It has to do with honesty from the police department, because originally they had claimed that she had somehow gotten out of the car herself, denied that it was them at fault. And obviously, if you know a police car, it's supposed to be like a little jail cell in the back of that car so that they can't reach up and get the officers in the car and they can't jump out the side. If you have someone in custody in the back of a police cruiser, you don't want them to be able to get out, right? So the idea that she would have busted the door open and leaped out of the car makes no sense. And so that was the story they went with initially. Now the investigation happened, and they, of course, found out what had really happened, which was, again, it wasn't malicious. I'm absolutely positive. They didn't purposely leave the door open hoping she would fall out. No. It was a mistake, a devastating, horrible, negligent mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. And so it's bad enough that mistake happened, but no one's claiming that you were acting maliciously until you lie about it. And so a point that I want to make is the police aren't, a monolith. They're not one organization across the entire country. It's not a federal organ, and we have federal law enforcement, but the majority of police interactions that are happening are with your municipal police department, right? So it's all of these separate, somewhat independent municipal police departments at a local level, but we think about them in terms of police. And for that reason, I think the responsibility of police officers to rise to the occasion, to be honest, and to have integrity is much, much higher. They have much more responsibility because they are representing what most people see to be the police. And if I hear a story about the police department over in this place, over in Georgia, in some town in Georgia, being dishonest, and then I have some interaction with a police officer here, I'm not in Georgia. It's a completely different police department, but I'm still going to feel like they could be dishonest against me. They could harm me in some way, because it's hard to separate in our mind that it's different organizations. And I don't even expect people to do that. And so I think because the police have so much power, and also because their reputation matters, they need to recognize that and be as honest as humanly possible, which they're not. And that is why when you hear a story come out and they say, oh, we felt threatened and that's why we had to shoot someone, that happens sometimes, right? Sometimes the police justifiably have to use their firearms to protect themselves. But the reason why we don't believe them when they tell us that in certain situations is because of a track record, again, not necessarily in one police department, but just the police generally, of lies being told to protect them. And thus we don't have a underlying trust in their word, which is really harmful, in my opinion, to a society. When the people who have a monopoly on violence, when the people who have the weapons, who have the authority to arrest you and harm you if necessary, don't have the reputation of being honest, even if, again, you're a police officer and you know that you're honest, you have to recognize there are a lot of stories out there of them trying to cover their butt, just like this, telling a false story up front, not admitting that it was a police officer who left the door open. Now you don't have that reputation of being honest, and thus you're going to have much more antagonistic interactions with people and a much harder time having people believe your word, which I think a society where when the police say something went horribly wrong, but it's because, we felt threatened, I wish we could believe that, but we can't believe that. So we have to think, well, maybe you offensively harmed someone, and every single situation has to be looked through a lens of, we have a hard time believing you, which is super unfortunate because of cases like this. Again, no one maliciously tried to harm her from, what I'm aware of. Someone made a horrible mistake not properly closing the door that led to her death. What they should have done is come out immediately and admitted to that, taken responsibility. But because they didn't, that's another stain among many on the police. Again, even though they are a bunch of different separate organizations in a sense, we do look at them as one group, And so because of that, you're putting all of these stains on police officers on the other side of the country's reputation. Now people have a hard time believing police officers in LA and Austin and, Oregon or whatever. Portland. I did a bunch of cities and then a state. So that's the larger point I wanted to make about this. But also, of course, heart goes out to her family, and so heartbreaking that this happened to her, to Breonna. But we need police to be honest, and we need police who have integrity consistently. Because one time you have a police officer who doesn't have integrity, now we have a hard time believing any of you. And that's the issue that we're facing in the country right now. And so how we make that happen on a governmental level is a larger conversation, but it needs to happen for sure. Thank you so much, BR Madden, for the super chat. You're absolutely amazing. Who said, "Here's to your A+ work ethic. Please never lose your enthusiasm." I will never. Let me tell you kids a story, okay? In relation to that, when I was laying in bed one night, okay? I was a young child, and instantly, just picture me laying there in like some dinosaur PJs. Instantly, my entire roof lifted off of my house, okay? And there was a bunch of wind. Picture my sheets are flopping all around, and I'm going like this. And there's a bright light on me. And I'm thinking, what's happening? Is this a helicopter? Am I under arrest? No, I didn't think that as a kid. I was just confused, right? And then God comes down. Bright light, right? And he says, "Luke, I'm going to give you an endless amount of enthusiasm, passion, drive, and energy. And it's going to come with some horrible side effects. You're going to be obsessed about a lot of things, but you're also going to be obsessed about your pursuits, right? So for the rest of your life, you're going to have maximum enthusiasm. Goodbye." And then he left. So you don't have to worry about me losing my enthusiasm. I have an endless supply of it. Because of that, I can't really sleep because I'm bzzz all the time. But I'm buzzing all the time for our beehive people. But I'm happy to deal with the consequences of that. Always being super high strung for the benefit of never losing the energy, the passion, and the optimism. Aw, Lisa. Isn't it? Think about however sad you think that I am. Think about how sad it is to be someone who's commenting on a small YouTuber saying that. Like, where does your life have to be if you're commenting on my stuff saying that? Ooh, that's unfortunate. You know what they say, Lisa? Or I say. I don't know if someone said this before. You're not going to stand taller by pushing down. But wait, let me re-say that, Lisa. 1 second. What's the phrasing? You can't lift yourself up by pushing other people down. There we go. There we go. So you might think that pooping on me will make you feel better about your own life. Unfortunately, it won't, and I apologize for that. Thank you, Sam. Yeah. I will say, too, just for anyone who does tune in and they're like, I like his stuff, but I feel like he doesn't get that many views. Just recognize, we're going to the moon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a master plan. It's all going to play out beautifully. We're like, Jared was here from the beginning, and Doug soon after, but we're like what? let me think. When did I start pushing? We're like 5 months in, maybe. Just figuring out at the beginning, you know, how to produce videos, all those things. We just started doing an actual daily show like 2 weeks ago. And, you know, most months we like doubled growth, doubled subscriber count. So we're going to keep that chugging along. Some fun things coming up in the future for that. But everyone has to start somewhere, Lisa. You know? All right, let's do our last story. But I appreciate you watching, because without you, it would be one less viewer. So you are contributing to the massive empire that we call the Luke Beasley Show. Let me get this prepped up. Let me remember. Yeah. Huge announcement. Video was January 25th, 2022. Yeah, so kind of end of January. I'm never going to get old and bitter. I might get old, but I won't get bitter, Doug. Don't worry. Tony, thank you so much for the super chat. He said, this is for Lisa, and if you are a singer, I want to hear it sometime, Luke. Yeah, you can find my music out there from my music days, and I occasionally will pop out a little something, like the song about Uvalde. One is decent? Only one of my songs is decent from Doug's perspective? Thank you again, Tony. Okay. Jared Kushner, as with everyone all the time who worked in the Trump administration, is now wanting it to be his time to release a memoir and make a bunch of money. So whenever you release a memoir and you're someone like Jared Kushner, who literally no one cares about, I'm kidding, sort of. Nobody wants to read a Jared Kushner memoir, let's say that. You have to put in some nuggets, right? Some interesting tidbits so that they get advertised on the news and then people go buy your book to see if there's anything else. Oftentimes, I'll advise you, if there's someone that you don't want to buy their book, but you hear really interesting things coming out of it, that's probably everything. Like, you'll probably read the book and be like, wow, the 5 things that were used to advertise while they were marketing the book were the 5 things that were interesting in that book. So don't worry about it if you get in that situation where you don't want to purchase someone's book because it's a bad person, but you are interested. So Jared Kushner, in his book, one of the big nuggets that was supposed to get a lot of interest on it was the fact that former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly of the Trump administration had shoved Jared Kushner's wife, Ivanka Trump, and Donald Trump's daughter, aggressively shoved her. But some people who were also within the administration, which, by the way, if that happened, that's horrible. Don't shove people. What the heck? But some people are contesting that account, namely Mick Mulvaney, who was also a White House Chief of Staff. Let's look at Chris Wallace break it down.
Tell you one really quick thing, because we all know, I hope I don't drive the control room nuts. We all know that oftentimes the conversation in the green room is more interesting than what's said on the air, the green room where we wait before we come on the air. I was talking with Mick Mulvaney. Jared Kushner's new book came up in which he says that that John Kelly, the predecessor for him as White House Chief of Staff, shoved Ivanka out of the way. He said that is inconceivable. Could he have brushed by her? Yeah, inconceivable that John Kelly, White House Chief of Staff, would have shoved Ivanka. He also said in the book, Kushner claims that he told Mulvaney that he had thyroid cancer. Mulvaney said, he never told me that. Wow. I have no recollection of it, and if he had, I would have remembered it.
Where were you
when
I was talking
show?
to Mick Mulvaney? Where were you when I was talking to Mick Mulvaney?
Okay, so a couple interesting parts about that. First of all, someone publicly coming out and saying that never happened is interesting. It doesn't mean it never happened, because Mick Mulvaney could be tight with John Kelly and just protecting a friend. And just saying that that's not within the character of that person doesn't really exonerate them in my mind. But him also saying that another random detail in the book wasn't true does start to take credibility away from Jared Kushner and the book as a whole, piece of work. And that was him saying, listen, in the book, Kushner says that he told me he had thyroid cancer. That's something I would remember. I have no memory of that. And so the fact that he's willing to come out and say there's another lie in that book makes me more willing to believe that maybe the Ivanka thing is a lie. Here's what I think actually happened. I think at some point there was an inappropriate physical event that happened. He was angry and stormed out of the room, and Ivanka didn't completely step to the side, and their shoulders bumped, and it was weird, and then Kushner kind of played that up to be him shoving her, which I think walk around someone, don't at all. That can actually hurt, when someone's shoulders hit your shoulder. So it could still have been a bad situation, especially if he was doing it out of spite. And I think Mick Mulvaney is picturing it move, and he's thinking John Kelly would never do that. And so then there's kind of a conflict there where Kushner needs to play up this thing that sort of happened for the purpose of the book, and Mick Mulvaney doesn't want to have someone that he knew look bad, and so is kind of denying that anything happened at all. And again, I don't really imagine even John Kelly going out of rage shoving Ivanka, because he would have been, Ivanka's the one person that Trump actually has some level of love for, even if kind of a weird romantic one. And so that would have caused all hell to break loose, I think. But if it did happen, that's horrible. But I do think it was their shoulders bumped because one of them was walking in a direction and didn't move enough. And that's being played up a bit. But the Mick Mulvaney's trying to defend, Kelly's honor. And that's the situation we're now in. I don't really care at all about this. I mean, I would care if Ivanka was assaulted. That would be horrible. But I don't care about Jared Kushner trying to do a book and all these things. I just love whenever people who previously were kind of allies now have to publicly feud. And I'm curious to see how Kushner would respond to this. And then it's also interesting if he really is lying about the thyroid cancer thing, lying about telling Mick Mulvaney about the thyroid cancer. That's so random and so weird. Because that's not a juicy detail. Why would you randomly lie about telling a bunch of people you had cancer if you didn't, or telling one person that you had cancer if you didn't? I don't see the benefit there. So that's also an interesting part of this. But then, lastly, it was really funny. Chris Wallace, first of all, just seeing him on CNN is kind of weird. Now he's just a correspondent because his show on CNN Plus is no longer there because CNN Plus died. But him saying, I don't know if this is going to anger the control room, but oftentimes the conversations that happen in the green room are more interesting than the ones on air. 2 points about that. First, definitely makes me wish I could hear more of those conversations, because even people who feud on air backstage are haha, this is all, not backstage, but in the green room, kind of the waiting area before you go on the air, are kind of, buddy and maybe don't care so much about these issues, or talking bad about other people. But then on top of that, it's interesting to think about, is he going without Mick Mulvaney's permission and saying that they had this conversation in the green room? Or do you think Mick Mulvaney was like, hey, I'm going to say this to you, feel free to say this on air because I want this to get out? Either way, that's interesting. Either Mick Mulvaney is kind of planting this, or Chris Wallace is giving up a private conversation that he had with someone off air. So fascinating stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if Jared Kushner lied, and I also wouldn't be surprised if something inappropriate did happen. But overall, don't buy the book. Just another person trying to make money off of their name. Crazy stuff. Oh no, our spammer came in. Jeez. Lisa's going hard. The unfortunate thing is, whatever the goal was of the statements, if you only knew today how much joy is in my soul, you wouldn't even attempt to knock me down. I'm just so on top of the world today. So that's fun. Good life. Your library has a Trump section? What? That's crazy. Alrighty, y'all. Sorry that today was such a short show. Obviously, same amount of news, a lot of news, but no React stuff. I have another thing tonight, but I'll try to do a fun stream over the weekend. I thank you all for being here. Love, love, love. And we'll see you